Starting off 2021, I thought it was going to be amazing. Okay, I know half had gone at this point and I'm very late with this, sorry about that, but I've been busy doing very legal activities. But for the most part, it has been fantastic for me. Games to play, fun to be had, and new adventures wherever I look. But unfortunately for me, my first experience in the world of gaming this year has left me with a very bitter taste in my mouth, making me wonder it was going to be the same as last year all over again with quarantine, toilet paper, and hand sanitizer. What was this experience that's caused so much existential dread? Well, that would be GodFall, Gearbox's answer to the question, what would Warframe be like if we made it but then watered down the Warframes and made every attack stun you and can't be blocked and yet also allow only for melee combat? I went into GodFall really wanting to enjoy it, and I was going to grind the gear, learn the moves, and take combat as seriously as World War VI and a half, only to instead think, oh well, this isn't what I was expecting, and not the way you expect a spicy curry to be unpleasant. No, I really wanted to enjoy this game, but instead I find myself playing Anton Ego from Ratatouille and making my first mainly negative opinion on something that I've played, and I'm not going to struggle with this, let me tell you. I love taking the piss, and I'm going to enjoy this if for any other reason than because if it's going to waste my time, I'm going to rip it to pieces. And with that being said, let's get the ball rolling, shall we? Welcome to a Willkak's Guide to GodFall. To start off with, I'd like to, because I'm used to it at this point, start with something actually positive about GodFall so it doesn't look like I've just jumped on the long since burned GodFall hate bandwagon. So to that effect, let me tell you about the visuals. This is an undeniably very visually pleasant game. Each area is unique in context to the game.
When it runs smoothly, it doesn't have more frame issues than a fucking shoddy optometrist.
Dave, I just said I'd like to be positive, so now's really not the time.
It is the time, mate. I know how you really feel about this game, so don't try to act like you're being objective now. Everything else you've said up to this point's been subjective.
Well, since we're already taking the piss then, I might as well tell you that the game runs about as smoothly as a creme brulee.
So very smooth then?
Well, actually no, because this creme brulee has actually been thrown out of a window. Fuck, that was a great night.
Oh, mate, she was a fantastic night.
Actually, Dave, do me a favour, since you're here, can you get me a drink? Every time that I get pissed off at this game, I'm going to have a shot so that I can actually keep this thing going.
Oh yeah, mate. Would you want the strong shit or the weak stuff?
Well, I am driving after this, so give me the strong shit, then I don't need to see the tree I crash into. To get back on track, the reason we're filling time here is because, well, we're supposed to be talking about the story here, but the story is, well, I'm not even sure it's shipped with the full game. I'm pretty sure it's hiding in the files there somewhere, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. And instead they just have this bloated side quest with characters as bombastic as cardboard cutouts of Handsome Jack on Digistruct Peak. And even then, they still exude more sassy charm than these fuckers. Except to say one nice thing, I find it quite humorous that the guy who voices the male main character is the guy who voices Dr. Thaddeus Black from Slug Terror. So there's like one thing it's got going for it.
I trusted Macros once. Now you're asking me to trust you. I learned something from that two-bit gangster. Power is everything.
Alright, and now we get to brush our hands clean of the story and the visuals because that's all we're going to say about them, because as unsatisfactory as they are, that's not where the bulk of my criticisms lie for this game. For that, we need to look at the gameplay. More specifically, we'll start with the valor plate system, and get ready for a lot of comparisons to Warframe. The valor plate system really just confuses me. It's implemented in a way like Warframe's, but they don't function nearly as noticeably in practice. Each plate has a passive and an Archon Fury ability, which is effectively just a super, but it makes you invulnerable and drains duration on hit rather than your health, which is nice I guess. But since I don't find myself gravitating towards any one plate, it seems a redundant system if you'd bothered to have asked me in the first place, Gearbox. But to articulate the reason I don't really find myself using too much of a certain valor plate, it's because the 10% buff really only matters if you're using a weapon that also has the same damage type, which means you have a much bigger chance to inflict damage. But we'll get onto that bit a bit later. And the reason I don't like the Archon Fury abilities is because, they're just kind of a guaranteed chance to do a status effect, and that's almost about it. It's not really very useful in combat whatsoever. I get it's supposed to be a Dark Souls-like type game where you have to dodge and move out the way, and it's not about doing so much more damage, it's about enduring yourself in combat. But it doesn't feel good to do that in this game. I've played a lot of other games like Monster Hunter where you have to do that same premise, but it's handled so much better because you actually feel like you're damaging the monster and you can actually get out of the way and learn its attacks much better. But like I said, I'll get onto those things in their respective sections. And I'll leave the designs of the valor plates alone because some of them actually do look quite cool. I'm not going to rag on that, they did a good job designing them. It's just the internal workings of the valor plates that I hate, not the outward appearance. And with that being said, let's flip the script and look at Warframes, where not only do Warframes have 4 different abilities that synergize well with each other, but also has a passive that is unique to every every frame, and not just a 10% buff in a certain regard. Let me give you an example of a warframe that does this really well. Let's take a look at Mirage, one of my favourite warframes. Her passive only allows her to do gymnastics twice as fast and slide for a little bit longer than other warframes. Not very useful, but it's actually very fun. Her first ability, Hall of Mirrors, creates clones of herself to use the exact same weapon as her and fire when she does, doing additional damage. Her second ability is kinda useless. Her third ability, Eclipse, increases her damage while standing in the light and gives her a heavy damage reduction while standing in the shadows. Her fourth and final ability is called Prism, which sends a disco ball floating across the battlefield, dealing damage to enemies. And since I mentioned synergy, there's huge potential for synergy with her first and third ability, letting you do massive amounts of damage and also being very difficult to hurt, if not at the exact same time, but if you use it right, you'll basically be immortal. And fuck it, because I'm having fun doing it, let's look at another warframe, Harrow.
Well, cunts, it's Dave here. So, he said he was going to do one more, but he actually went on to list every single warframe in the game and their abilities and synergies and shit, and I don't really think that's appropriate. He kind of lost sight of what he was supposed to be doing, so I've done you a solid and I've just gotten rid of half of it. Let's just pretend like he talked about a lot of the stuff at the moment. He's actually going downhill, and I'm trying to sort him out, calm him down, but it's not working that well. It's only so much I can do to keep him at bay. Anyway, I never addressed you before, so hi, I'm Dave. I'm just here, really. I don't know what the fuck I do. Anyway, I'll catch you later.
See how much more depth the Warframe system has compared to the Valor Plate system? If not, then I've got to ask why, because there's just to use a very bad pun, the difference is night and day. Anyway, Valor Plates are just so uninspired and ramshackle as fuck compared to Warframes. And even I didn't know I was gonna say ramshackle as fuck ever again. And that's not even mentioning how unrewarding getting a new Valor Plate feels compared to a Warframe. To get a Warframe, you have to farm the 3 components, the neuroptics, the chassis, the systems, build them, then build the final Warframe, which does take 3 days, but you can fucking wait, then level that up to level 30, stick an Oracle reactor on it, which doubles its mod capacity, and if you feel so inclined, you can put a form on it so more powerful mods are cheaper, meaning you can put more on, and make yourself a full build, which is completely customizable depending on the person who wants to use it. Whereas in GodFall, you just find a certain amount of resources, use some currency, and get the thing fully leveled and ready to go. And you may be asking, well, that sounds a lot easier. Well, yes, it is a lot easier, but I thought that wasn't the point. I thought the point was for it to be a fun grind. You spend more than 20 minutes trying to get new stuff on, instead of just being like, oh, here you go, have this thing. Oh, cool, thanks, what do I do now? I don't know, we gave you the thing you were looking for. Anyway, I've talked about that enough.
It's getting harder and harder to keep calm now, isn't it?
Not now, Dave. Right, loot drops. I'm not saying I've been heavily shafted, but for the sake of clarity, I may have been, so keep that in the back of your mind. But I've never gotten anything better than blue quality gear from just mincing cannon fodder. And last time I checked, in Borderlands, which is another Gearbox saga, but more importantly, another game where you get a large focus on looting, where the blues are 1, decent to use, and 2, can actually compete with legendary gear. If you've had a legendary for a while, you would eventually need to replace it, as legendaries always become obsolete after a while, meaning you have to try a variety of guns and character mods on your playthrough. In GodFall, fuck it, legendaries have as much chance to drop as an Olympic level athlete off their bicycle, and only seem to drop from the Tower of Trials, which you have to pay to get into. Now, I'm not saying the grind in the tower is bad, it's just incredibly tedious due to the combat. The combat in this game feels so fucking slow. But to start with, I'm going to talk about the weapons. Just to clarify, before we were talking about them as standard loot drops, now we're talking about their actual application and effectiveness, and it's ridiculous to even make a comparison, but let's look at Dauntless. Which incidentally, when I wrote the script, which was like a few months ago, decided to fall into they changed it and now I hate it folder of games, but then they added back the ability to be able to do stuff by yourself, so it's fine again, we're all fine, it's happy and good. When you choose a weapon in Dauntless, it's based on one of 3 things, this is by my standards by the way: speed, damage, or potential. How fast, how much does it hurt, and how applicable is it in different situations. And I used almost every weapon equally in my time in Ramsgate, although I mainly lead towards the axe and the chain blades, which, as you could probably guess, are on completely different ends of the spectrum when it comes to these statistics. Chain blades are fast with low damage, but they're fast enough that when used effectively, they still feel like they're doing damage and working, to put it bluntly. And speaking of bluntly, while the axe was slower, it had much more damage, meaning that it would easily be able to keep up with someone using the chain blades. Let's do a quick test to see how fast I killed this, what is that, Scan? Yeah, with 2 unleveled weapons from the same monster, meaning that they have the same stats, same mod slots and everything to make it a fair test and change as little as possible. Oh, look at that, how remarkably similar. And I had to do the timing myself because they removed the thing where, at least I can't find it, so you can't time it in-game anymore, which is fucking sick joke. And also, just for fun, I did the exact same test again, but using my two favourite pairs of chain blades and my favourite axe. And, well, there's the stats for that if you care. In GodFall, the weapons usually come with a similar 10% buff as seen on the plates, meaning that if you're unlucky and keep getting different elements, you would effectively be softlock at doing maximum damage for no reason other than RNG, and picking your plate based on the weapon you have that you like the most. Not the other way around as it should be. If I want to, relating this back to Warframe again, use Mirage, which is one of my favourite frames as I said, I can use any weapon as her passive will just make me do gymnastics quicker, which doesn't affect the frames at all, and her first ability will make her clones of herself, which all have the exact same weapon that I have, meaning that she will effectively dump the damage of that weapon, making every weapon viable, while also having a 400% damage buff with my stats in the sunlight, and a 95% damage reduction in her shadows thanks to her third ability, which is... that's a lot of damage. The combat itself is quite unremarkable, but when facing fodder units, it's alright, but nothing fancy. And it's alright, okay? It's not terrible when facing fodder. And to actually praise the game on something, the shield is one of the best aspects of it, being able to use it in so many different ways. Throwing it at a single target, pressing it again to teleport over to a high priority target, or throwing in an arc to hit lots of opponents before moving in on finishes for almost, if not all of them. It feels great, and it actually does a decent amount of damage by itself. But there are a lot of stupid drawbacks to the shield, like the idiotic application of the stun, which is supposed to interrupt unparryable attacks, but 99% of the time, it either doesn't work, doesn't connect, you're out of range, or your shield is on cooldown. So kinda what's the point? In a game where almost every enemy has these undodgeable attacks, you would think that I should take a slow and methodical approach to figure out the best method of attacking and when they are telegraphing these attacks so that I can avoid them. Well, I thought the same thing, but the game punishes you for thinking logically with a great big whopping backhand before saying no, you don't get to learn. Instead, you have these random strings of attacks with 3 different unavoidable attacks in a row. The worst enemy for this is these fuckers. That's all I gotta say about it. To bring it back to Dauntless, I, for the most part, know when a behemoth will do just about anything as a solo hunter. I thought it was the first thing I should do, and it will make my life a lot easier. Guess what? It did. After fighting Monster 3 to 4 times, I'm completely able to recognize all of its attacks, because they clearly telegraph them. In GodFall, you'd be better off sending me an actual fucking telegraph to tell me what's up. Not that it matters though, because I'm done and I've had enough of trying to keep calm. The story is rubbish, the characters are cardboard cutouts from a fucking back room. I'm so done, I don't even want to get into it, man, anymore. I'm fucking finished.
It's alright, babe. I think that's enough.
Thank fuck for that, because I've sincerely had enough.
I know, bud, it's alright. Just wrap this up and you won't have to think about this game again.
Alright, let's just get this finished with. Look, in conclusion, GodFall is that game that everyone seems to hate, and sorry Astacross Gaming, but I don't get what the hell you were on about when you said this game was worth anyone's time, let alone my own, which, because I'm me, it's very precious indeed. Instead, everyone said it was a flop, and me being the eternal optimist thought, I'll try it out for myself. That's exactly what I did, and after enjoying the liquid excretion this game calls half of its mechanics and gameplay and story, which, if you still feel like me talking about, my god, have I not said enough to convince you that this is not worth your time? Just, mate, don't, unless you have to or the world will implode, just don't. I'm a firm believer that if you can justify the time you spent doing something, then it wasn't been wasted. And this game, I can't say it can justify the time I've spent playing it, let alone the space it's currently taking up on my PC, because this game is a myriad of poorly executed ideas, which is ironic or a coincidence. I can't be bothered to think of the right definition right now, because actually, the only thing this game managed to execute properly, well, it was itself.